In the vast emptiness of space, where stars glimmered like tiny jewels against an endless black canvas, humanity had spread far beyond its cradle on Earth. The planet that once nurtured them was now a distant memory, a relic of the past buried under layers of history. Humanity had learned to live among the stars, building colonies, exploring new worlds, and pushing the boundaries of what they thought possible. But the galaxy was not always kind. Sometimes it held secrets too dangerous to uncover. Captain Jian stood on the bridge of the starship Hua-Rang, her sharp eyes scanning the holographic display in front of her. She was a woman of quiet strength, her dark hair tied back neatly, her uniform pressed and spotless. Around her, the soft hum of machinery filled the air, punctuated by the occasional beep from the crew's consoles. The Hua-Rang wasn't the largest or fastest ship in the fleet, but it was reliable, and under Jion's leadership, it had completed countless missions without incident. "Navigator Hai Wu," she said, turning to the young man seated at the navigation console. His fingers moved quickly over the glowing interface as he plotted their course through the stars. "How long until we reach the edge of the designated zone?" Heiwu glanced up briefly, his expression calm but focused. "Approximately 6 hours, Captain. We're approaching an uncharted region of the galaxy. Sensors indicate unusual readings." Ji Yun frowned slightly. Unusual readings were never a good sign. "Define unusual." Heiwu hesitated for a moment before tapping a few commands. A series of graphs and charts appeared on the main screen. "There's a significant drop in electromagnetic activity. It's as if this area is completely devoid of communication signals. No subspace chatter, no distress calls, nothing. Not even background noise from natural phenomena." Communications Officer Subin leaned forward in her seat, her brow furrowed. "That's impossible," she said softly. "Even the emptiest regions of space have some level of ambient energy. This is like a void." Jiyeon crossed her arms, considering the implications. Could it be interference? Some kind of anomaly? Subin shook her head. "I've run diagnostics. Our equipment is functioning perfectly. Whatever this is, it's real." The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the faint hum of the ship's engines. For a moment, everyone on the bridge seemed to hold their breath, as though afraid, to disturb the fragile balance of the universe around them. "We'll proceed with caution," Jiyeon finally said, her voice firm. "Heiwu, adjust our trajectory. Let's take a closer look at this silent zone." As the Hua-Rang moved deeper into the unknown, the tension aboard the ship grew palpable. The crew exchanged uneasy glances, whispering among themselves about what they might find. Was it a natural phenomenon, a remnant of some ancient disaster, or something else entirely? Hours passed, and the ship entered the heart of the mysterious region. At first there was nothing out of the ordinary, just the usual expanse of stars and swirling nebulae. But then, strange things began to happen. It started with small malfunctions. Lights flickered intermittently, and temperature controls fluctuated wildly. Engineer Tae-hyun, a wiry man with grease-stained hands, scrambled to address the issues, muttering under his breath about faulty wiring. But when the ship's artificial gravity wavered, sending loose objects floating toward the ceiling, even he couldn't deny that something was seriously wrong. Then came the whispers. At first they were faint, almost imperceptible. A soft murmur in the background like the rustle of leaves in the wind. But as time went on, the whispers grew louder, clearer. They seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, echoing through the corridors of the ship. Some crew members claimed they heard voices speaking in languages they didn't understand, while others swore they recognized fragments of their own names amidst the cacophony. Pilot Sung-ho, a tall man with a perpetual scowl, reported seeing strange shapes outside the viewport. At first he dismissed them as tricks of the light, but soon he couldn't ignore the sight of humanoid figures flickering against the blackness of space. Their forms shimmered and danced, resembling flames caught in a breeze. "We need answers," Jiyeon declared during an emergency meeting in the briefing room. Her tone left no room for argument. "This isn't just a technical issue. There's something out there, and we need to figure out what it is." Archaeologist Min Ju, a petite woman with glasses perched on her nose, cleared her throat nervously. "I think I might know where to start looking," she said. Based on the data Hai Wu provided, this region matches descriptions of areas mentioned in old records, specifically accounts from explorers who encountered traces of an ancient alien civilization. Aliens? Taehyun asked skeptically. You mean little green men with big heads? Minju rolled her eyes. Not quite. These aliens were highly advanced, but their society collapsed thousands of years ago. From what I've read, they believed silence was a curse, a sign of death and decay. They tried to conquer it, using technology to create sounds so powerful they could obliterate entire worlds. Jiyeon raised an eyebrow. And you think we're dealing with remnants of their work? It's possible, Minju admitted. If we can locate any artifacts left behind, we might be able to piece together what happened here and how it affects us now. With renewed determination, the crew set to work. Hai Wu adjusted their course once again, steering the Hwarang toward a nearby moon that showed signs of geological disturbances. As they approached, scans revealed the presence of metallic structures buried beneath its surface. This has to be it, Minju said excitedly. Let's suit up and take a closer look. Descending onto the moon's barren landscape felt like stepping into another world. The ground was cracked and dry, littered with jagged rocks and dust that sparkled faintly in the dim light of a distant sun. The team moved cautiously, their boots crunching against the surface as they made their way toward the ruins. What they found was both awe-inspiring and unsettling. Towering spires of metal jutted out of the ground, twisted and corroded by time. Strange symbols covered every surface, glowing faintly despite centuries of neglect. Minju knelt beside one of the structures, running her gloved fingers over the markings. These are warnings, she murmured, her voice tinged with awe. They're telling us to turn back, to leave this place untouched. But why? Jiyeon asked, her gaze sweeping over the desolate scene. What were they trying to protect? Or hide? Before anyone could answer, the whispers returned, louder than ever. They seemed to emanate from the ruins themselves, growing into a deafening roar that vibrated through the very air. The crew staggered, clutching their helmets as the sound threatened to overwhelm them. And then, just as suddenly as it began, the noise stopped. In the eerie silence that followed, Jiyeon realized something crucial. Whatever force had created this silent zone wasn't dead. It was waiting. The crew of the Hwarang stood frozen in the shadow of the ancient ruins, their hearts pounding as the silence stretched on. The whispers had vanished as abruptly as they had returned, leaving behind an unsettling stillness that felt heavier than any sound. Captain Jiyeon clenched her fists inside her gloves, her mind racing to make sense of what they had just experienced. Minju, she said, breaking the silence. What did those symbols mean? What were they warning us about? Minju hesitated, her eyes scanning the glowing markings etched into the metallic spires. She adjusted her glasses and leaned closer, her gloved fingers tracing the intricate patterns. It's fragmented, she admitted, but I can pick out certain words. Silence, fire, destruction. They're talking about something called the flame tongues. It sounds like a weapon, or maybe a tool. Something powerful enough to wipe out entire civilizations? Weapon? Taehyun echoed, his voice tinged with disbelief. You think these aliens wiped themselves out with their own invention? It's possible, Minju replied. From what I've read in the records, this civilization believed silence was unnatural. They saw it as a sign of death, a void that needed to be filled. So they created the flame tongues to conquer silence, to fill the galaxy with sound, no matter the cost. Ji-yoon frowned. And now we're standing in the aftermath, a silent zone where nothing lives, nothing speaks. Is this what happens when you try to destroy silence? Minju nodded slowly. Maybe. Or maybe the flame tongues are still here, buried somewhere beneath this moon, waiting. The thought sent a chill through the group. If the artifacts were still active, they could pose a threat not just to the crew, but to the entire galaxy. But turning back wasn't an option, not for Ji-yoon. She had spent years leading missions into uncharted territory, and she wasn't about to let fear stop her from uncovering the truth. Let's keep moving, she said firmly. If there's something down here, we need to find it before it finds us. The team pressed on, their footsteps crunching against the brittle surface of the moon. As they ventured deeper into the ruins, the structures grew more elaborate, their designs shifting from jagged spires to smooth, flowing shapes that seemed almost organic. Strange carvings covered every surface, depicting scenes of war and destruction. In one panel, a massive wave of fire engulfed a planet, reducing it to ash. In another, humanoid figures reached toward the sky, their mouths open in silent screams. These people went too far? Haywu muttered, his voice barely audible over the hum of their suit's life support systems. They played with forces they didn't understand, and paid the price. Ji-un added grimly. As they moved, the air around them seemed to grow heavier, pressing down on their shoulders like an invisible weight. The faint glow of the symbols pulsed rhythmically, as though alive, watching them. Every step felt deliberate, as if the ruins themselves were testing their resolve. Then, without warning, the ground beneath them trembled. Dust and debris rained down from above, forcing the crew to take cover. When the shaking subsided, they found themselves staring at a new structure, a massive doorway carved into the side of a cliff. Its surface shimmered faintly, reflecting the dim light of the distant sun. "This wasn't here before," Sheng-Ho said, his voice tense. "Did we trigger something?" Minju stepped forward cautiously, her eyes wide with fascination. "No. I think it's been here all along, hidden until now." Ji-Yun gestured for the team to follow her as she approached the doorway. Up close, the carvings on its surface were even more intricate, depicting flames swirling around strange, otherworldly creatures. At the center of the design was a single symbol, a tongue wreathed in fire. "The flame tongues," Minju whispered, her voice trembling with awe. "This must be where they kept them." "Do we really want to go inside?" Tae-hyun asked, his tone laced with unease. "Whatever's in there, it's dangerous. We've already seen what it can do." "We don't have a choice," Ji-un replied. "If these artifacts are still active, we need to understand them. Otherwise, we risk unleashing something we can't control." With that, she activated the controls on her suit and stepped through the doorway. The others followed reluctantly, their flashlights cutting through the darkness as they entered the cavern beyond. Inside, the air was thick and heavy, carrying a faint metallic tang. The walls glowed softly, illuminating narrow passageways that twisted and turned like a labyrinth. Strange humming sounds echoed through the corridors, growing louder the deeper they went. The crew moved cautiously, their footsteps muffled by the oppressive atmosphere. After what felt like hours, they reached a large chamber at the heart of the ruins. In the center of the room floated 3 orbs, each pulsating with radiant light. The orbs hovered silently, suspended in mid-air, their surfaces rippling like liquid fire. Around them, the walls were covered in more carvings, depicting scenes of both creation and destruction. Minju gasped, her eyes fixed on the orbs. These are the flame tongues." "They're beautiful," Subin murmured, stepping closer despite the tension in the air. Her voice carried an odd note of reverence, as if she were entranced by the artifact's glow. "Do you feel it? The power? The energy?" "Subin, stay back," Ji-un warned, her hand resting on the hilt of her sidearm. "We don't know what they'll do if we touch them." But Subin didn't listen. She reached out tentatively, her gloved fingers brushing against the surface of the nearest orb. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a surge of energy rippled through the chamber, sending shockwaves through the air. The crew staggered, clutching their helmets as the orbs began to resonate, emitting a low, melodic hum that vibrated through. "Their very bones! What have you done?" Ji-Yun shouted, her voice barely audible over the growing sound. I don't know," Subin stammered, pulling her hand back. Her eyes were wide with panic, but also something else, something that looked disturbingly like wonder. The humming grew louder, rising into a deafening crescendo. The orb's glow intensified, bathing the chamber in blinding light. Shadows danced across the walls, twisting and contorting into shapes that resembled living beings. The crew watched in horror as the forms took on a life of their own, stepping out of the walls and into the room. They were humanoid, their bodies composed entirely of flickering flames. Their faces were featureless, save for glowing eyes that burned with an intelligence far beyond human comprehension. They moved silently, their presence filling the chamber with an overwhelming sense of dread. "Captain," Hei-Wu whispered, his voice trembling. "What are they?" "I don't know," Ji-un replied, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. "But we're not staying to find out." She raised her weapon, aiming it at the nearest flame being. Before she could fire, the creature raised a hand, and a wall of fire erupted between them, cutting off their escape route. The crew backed away, their weapons drawn but useless against the inferno surrounding them. One of the beings stepped forward, its fiery form shifting and changing as it moved. It stopped directly in front of Subin, tilting its head as if studying her. Then, without warning, it reached out, its hand passing through her chest like smoke. Subin gasped, her body convulsing as a surge of energy coursed through her. Her eyes glowed brightly, matching the intensity of the orbs. When the being withdrew its hand, she collapsed to the ground, unconscious. "Subin!" Ji-un cried, rushing to her side. She checked her vitals, relieved to find that she was still alive. But something was wrong. Her skin was warm to the touch, almost feverish, and her breathing was shallow. The flame beings began to retreat, melting back into the walls as quickly as they had appeared. The orbs dimmed, their glow fading until the chamber was once again shrouded in darkness. "We need to get her back to the ship," Ji-un ordered, lifting Subin into her arms. "Now!" The crew didn't argue. They retraced their steps through the labyrinthine ruins, their pace quickened by fear and urgency. As they emerged into the open air, the weight of the moon's silence pressed down on them once more. But this time, it felt different, as if the ruins had awakened something that had long been dormant. Back aboard the Hwarang, the crew worked tirelessly to stabilize Subin. Her condition remained unchanged, her body radiating heat like a furnace. Tae-hyun ran diagnostics, but the readings made no sense. Whatever had happened to her, it was beyond anything they had encountered before. Ji-un stood by the viewport, staring out at the moon below. The ruins were quiet now, their glow extinguished, but she knew they weren't safe. The flame tongues were still out there, waiting, and whatever power they held, it had already begun to change them. Subin lay unconscious in the medical bay of the Hwarang, her body glowing faintly with an unnatural warmth. Her skin shimmered under the harsh fluorescent lights, as though fire itself coursed through her veins. The crew gathered around her, their faces etched with worry and confusion. They had seen strange things in their travels, but nothing like this. Whatever had happened inside the ruins, it had changed Subin, and none of them knew how to fix it. Captain Ji-un stood at the foot of the bed, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. She watched Subin's chest rise and fall with shallow breaths, her mind racing. The mission was supposed to be simple: explore the silent zone, gather data, and return home. But now they were dealing with something far beyond their understanding. An ancient artifact that seemed alive, capable of altering reality itself. "Her vitals are stable," Tae-hyun reported, his voice tinged with frustration. "But her body temperature keeps rising. It's like she's generating heat from within. I've never seen anything like it." Minju adjusted her glasses nervously, glancing between Subin and the others. "It's the flame tongues," she said softly. "They must have done something to her when that thing touched her. Maybe they're trying to communicate, or maybe they're using her as a vessel." "A vessel for what?" Hei-Wu asked sharply. His usual calm demeanor was cracking under the strain of the situation. "We don't even know what those artifacts are or what they want." "We need answers," Ji-un interrupted, her tone firm. "If we leave her like this, we risk losing her and possibly putting everyone else in danger. Minju, go back to the records you found earlier. See if there's anything about what happens when someone comes into contact with the flame tongues." Minju nodded quickly and hurried out of the room, her footsteps echoing down the corridor. Meanwhile, Ji-un turned her attention to Seung-ho, who stood near the door, his arms crossed and his expression grim. "Seung-ho," she said, "I want you to monitor the ship's systems. If those artifacts caused malfunctions before, they might do it again. Keep an eye out for anything unusual." He gave a curt nod and left without a word. Ji-eun sighed heavily, running a hand through her hair. This was not how the mission was supposed to go. Every decision felt heavier now, every step forward fraught with uncertainty. She glanced at Tae-hyun, who was still fiddling with the medical equipment. "Tae-hyun," she said gently, "do what you can for her. But if her condition worsens, let me know immediately." "I will, Captain," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. He didn't look up, too focused on adjusting dials and checking readouts. Ji-eun left the medical bay, her thoughts swirling like storm clouds. She needed clarity, a plan, but first, she needed information. She made her way to the research lab where Minju was hunched over a console, scrolling through old files and fragments of text. "Find anything useful?" Ji-eun asked as she entered the room. Minju looked up, her eyes wide behind her glasses. "Maybe," she said cautiously. "There's mention of something called the Awakening. Apparently, when someone interacts directly with the flame tongues, they become part of them, or at least connected to them. It says here that the person gains access to immense power, but at a cost." "What kind of cost?" Ji-eun pressed. "That's the problem," Minju admitted. "The records are vague. Some say the individual loses their humanity, becoming more like the artifacts themselves. Others suggest it's a form of enlightenment, a way to transcend mortality. Either way, it doesn't sound good." Ji-eun frowned deeply. "So we're dealing with something that could destroy her, or turn her into something else entirely." "It seems that way," Minju said quietly. "And if we try to remove the connection prematurely, well, the texts warn against interference. They say doing so could unleash catastrophic consequences." "Catastrophic how?" Ji-eun demanded. Minju hesitated. "Like breaking the balance of silence and sound, causing another silent zone, or worse." Ji-eun clenched her fists, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. Every path seemed blocked, every option fraught with peril. But one thing was clear. They couldn't just sit back and wait. They had to act. Back in the medical bay, Subin began to stir. Her eyelids fluttered open, revealing irises that glowed faintly, like embers smoldering in the dark. She sat up slowly, her movements deliberate but unnaturally fluid. Tae-hyun stepped back instinctively, his hands raised as if to shield himself. "Subin," he ventured cautiously. "Are you okay?" She tilted her head, studying him with an intensity that sent chills down his spine. Then she spoke, but her voice was different. It resonated with multiple tones, layered and harmonious, as though several voices were speaking through her at once. "The silence must end," she said, her words echoing eerily in the small room. "The galaxy cannot remain deaf. We will speak with flames." Tae-hyun stumbled backward, tripping over a chair in his haste to get away. "Captain!" he shouted, his voice trembling. "You need to see this!" Moments later, Ji-eun burst into the room, followed closely by Hai-woo and Sung-ho. Subin stood now, her feet planted firmly on the floor. Her glowing eyes swept over the group, lingering briefly on each of them. "Subin," Ji-eun said carefully, her voice steady despite the unease gnawing at her insides. "Can you hear me? Do you know who you are?" For a moment, there was silence. Then Subin smiled, a serene, almost otherworldly expression. "I am the voice of creation," she replied. "I carry the fire that will ignite the stars. You sought answers, and now you have them." "This isn't you," Ji-eun insisted, taking a cautious step forward. "Whatever is happening, we can help you fight it. You're stronger than this." Subin's smile faltered slightly, replaced by a look of sorrow. "You misunderstand. This is not a battle. It is a gift. The flame tongues have chosen me to restore balance, to fill the void with light and sound. Without them, existence fades into nothingness." "You're talking about destruction," Ji-eun countered. "If you unleash that power, you'll destroy everything, including yourself." "No," Subin said softly, shaking her head. "I will save it. Silence is death. Only through fire can life endure." Before anyone could respond, the ship shuddered violently, throwing them off balance. Alarms blared throughout the corridors, red warning lights flashing ominously. Shung Ho rushed to the intercom system, his face pale with alarm. "Captain, we've got a problem," he called out. "The ruins! They're activating! Something's coming online!" Ji-eun's heart sank. She turned back to Subin, who stood perfectly still, her glowing eyes fixed on the viewport. Outside, the moon's surface was shifting. The ruins lit up from within, their metallic spires blazing with fiery energy. A massive beam of light shot upward, piercing the sky and illuminating the silent zone like a second sun. "We have to stop her," Ji-eun said urgently, addressing the rest of the crew. "If we don't, whatever power she's tapped into will spread uncontrollably." "But how?" Haewoo asked desperately. "We can't hurt her." "We may not have a choice," Ji-eun replied grimly. "Minju, find a way to sever the connection. Tae-hyun, prepare containment protocols. Sung-ho, keep the ship steady. And Haewoo, Buti, paused, meeting his gaze with a mixture of determination and regret. "Be ready to pilot us out of here, if it comes to that." As the crew scrambled to carry out her orders, Ji-eun approached Subin one last time. The woman who had once been their communications officer now radiated an aura of both beauty and terror, her presence filling the room like a living flame. "Subin," Ji-eun said softly, her voice laced with sorrow. "Please, come back to us." Subin regarded her silently for a moment, her expression unreadable. Then, with a flicker of movement, she vanished, not into thin air, but into the very fabric of the ship itself. The walls shimmered briefly, as though absorbing her essence, before returning to normal. "She's gone," Tae-hyun whispered, his voice hollow. "Not gone," Ji-eun corrected. "Integrated. She's become part of the ship, and part of the flame tongues." Outside, the ruins continued to pulse with energy, the beam of light growing brighter with each passing second. The crew exchanged panicked glances, knowing they were running out of time. "We need to act fast," Ji-eun declared. "Before it's too late." The Hwarang trembled as the ruins on the moon below pulsed with fiery energy. The beam of light shooting into the sky grew brighter, casting an eerie glow across the ship's viewport. Inside, the crew scrambled to respond, their movements frantic, but purposeful. Captain Ji-eun stood at the center of it all, her mind racing as she tried to piece together a plan to stop whatever was happening. "Subin's gone," Tae-hyun said again, his voice strained. He stared at the empty space where she had been moments before, his hands trembling slightly. "What do we do now? How do we fight something that's inside the ship?" Ji-eun clenched her fists, her jaw tight with determination. "We don't fight her. We find a way to bring her back, or at least contain her. Minju, tell me you've made progress." Minju sat hunched over a console in the corner of the room, her glasses slipping down her nose as she pored over ancient texts and schematics. She glanced up briefly, her expression grim. "There's a ritual mentioned in the records, a way to sever the connection between a person and the flame tongues. But it's risky. If done incorrectly, it could overload the artifacts and release their full power." "Full power?" Haewoo echoed, his voice sharp with alarm. "What does that mean?" "It means we'd be dealing with something far worse than a silent zone," Minju replied. "It could spread uncontrollably, consuming everything in its path. Silence would be replaced by chaos." Ji-eun nodded slowly, absorbing the weight of the situation. Every choice carried consequences, and they were running out of time. Outside, the beam of light from the ruins intensified, bathing the ship in waves of heat and radiation. Alarms continued to blare, warning of rising temperatures and structural stress. "Tae-hyun, reinforce the hull," Ji-eun ordered. "Sung-ho, keep the ship steady. Haewoo, prepare for an emergency jump if things go south. And Minju, explain this ritual to me." Minju took a deep breath, pushing her glasses back up her nose. "The ritual requires us to channel the energy of the flame tongues back into themselves. It's like creating a feedback loop. To do that, we need to use one of the orbs, the source of their power, as a focal point. But someone has to stay behind to activate it." "Stay behind?" Ji-eun asked sharply. "You mean stay on the moon?" Minju hesitated, then nodded. "Whoever activates the ritual will have to remain close to the ruins until it's complete. Once it starts, there won't be time to escape." Silence fell over the group as the implications sank in. Someone would have to sacrifice themselves to save the rest, and possibly the galaxy itself. "I'll do it," Tae-hyun said suddenly, stepping forward. His voice was firm despite the fear in his eyes. "I'm the engineer. I know how to handle dangerous systems. If anyone can pull this off, it's me." "No," Ji-eun replied immediately. "You're needed here. Without you, we won't make it back alive." She turned to face the others. "This is my responsibility. I'm the captain. My job is to protect this crew and the mission." "But Captain," Haewoo began, only to be cut off by Ji-eun's raised hand. "There's no time to argue," she said firmly. "Prepare the shuttle. We'll head back to the moon and enact the ritual. Everyone else stays on board and gets ready to leave as soon as it's done." Reluctantly, the crew obeyed. They worked quickly, gathering supplies and prepping the shuttle for launch. As Ji-eun strapped herself into the pilot's seat, she felt a strange mix of fear and resolve. This might be her last mission, but she knew it was the right decision. The shuttle descended onto the moon's surface, landing near the glowing ruins. Ji-eun stepped out, her boots crunching against the brittle ground. The air shimmered with heat, and the hum of energy vibrated through her suit. She approached the massive doorway, which opened automatically as she drew near. Inside, the chamber housing the flame tongues pulsed with even greater intensity than before. The three orbs floated silently, their surfaces rippling like liquid fire. Subin's presence was everywhere. Her voice whispered faintly in the background, urging Ji-eun to join her, to embrace the flames. Ignoring the temptation, Ji-eun moved to the center of the room. She placed a small device on the floor, a containment unit designed to channel the orb's energy. Min-ju had explained the process step by step. Activate the device, direct the energy inward, and maintain control long enough for the feedback loop to take hold. As Ji-eun initiated the sequence, the orbs responded violently. Their glow intensified, filling the chamber with blinding light. Waves of heat radiated outward, forcing Ji-eun to shield her face with her arm. The whispers grew louder, overlapping into a deafening roar. "You cannot stop what has begun," Subin's voice echoed, clearer now. "The silence must end. Let the flames speak." Ji-eun gritted her teeth, focusing on the task at hand. Her fingers flew over the controls, adjusting settings and stabilizing the flow of energy. Sweat dripped down her brow beneath her helmet, but she didn't falter. She could feel the power of the flame tongues surging around her, threatening to overwhelm her senses. Through sheer willpower, she held on. The containment unit sputtered and sparked, struggling to contain the immense force being channeled through it. Sparks flew, and the device began to smoke, but Ji-eun refused to give up. She shouted commands aloud, reinforcing her focus. "Hold together!" she yelled, slamming her fist against the device when it threatened to fail. "Just a little longer!" Outside, the beam of light dimmed slightly, flickering as the ritual took effect. On board the Hwa-rang, the crew watched anxiously as readings showed the energy levels fluctuating wildly. Haewoo adjusted their position, preparing for a rapid departure. Back in the chamber, Ji-eun felt the strain reaching its peak. Her muscles burned with exhaustion, and her vision blurred. But finally, the containment unit stabilized, locking the energy into a self-sustaining loop. The orbs' glow faded, their fiery essence collapsing inward until they were nothing more than inert spheres. The chamber fell silent. The oppressive weight of the ruins lifted, replaced by an eerie calm. Ji-eun staggered backward, collapsing to her knees as the adrenaline drained from her body. She looked around, half expecting Subin to reappear, but the room remained empty. "Captain," Sung-ho's voice crackled over the comms. "Are you okay? We're reading a drop in energy levels. Did it work?" Ji-eun activated her communicator, her voice weak but steady. "It's done. Get ready to leave." She climbed to her feet, wincing at the pain coursing through her limbs. As she made her way back to the shuttle, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching her. The ruins may have been silenced, but their secrets lingered, waiting for the next curious soul to uncover them. When Ji-eun returned to the Hwa-rang, the crew greeted her with a mixture of relief and awe. They helped her aboard, checking her vitals and offering words of gratitude. But Ji-eun didn't feel like celebrating. She stared out the viewport as the ship ascended, leaving the moon and the ruins behind. For now, the threat had been neutralized. But Ji-eun knew better than to believe it was truly over. The flame tongues had spoken, and their echoes would reverberate through the galaxy for years to come. Quen 2.5, Max 5.02. The galaxy turned its back. Others fell silent. We spoke with flames, part. The Hwarang drifted away from the moon, its engines humming softly as it carried the crew further from the ruins that had nearly consumed them. Captain? Ji-eun sat in the command chair on the bridge, her body aching and her mind heavy with exhaustion. She stared out at the stars through the viewport, her thoughts swirling like storm clouds. The ritual had worked. The flame tongues were silent. Their power contained, but the cost weighed heavily on her. Subin was gone. Not dead, exactly, but lost to the artifact's influence. Her presence lingered faintly throughout the ship, a ghostly echo of what she had become. The crew tried not to talk about it, but the absence hung over them like a shadow. Even Tae-hyun, who usually kept his emotions hidden behind a mask of practicality, seemed quieter than usual, his eyes distant as he worked on repairs. "We should run diagnostics," Haewoo suggested, breaking the silence on the bridge. His voice was soft, hesitant. "Just to make sure there's no residual energy affecting the ship." Ji-eun nodded without looking at him. "Do it," she said simply. "Check everything. Hull integrity, life support, communication systems." "I don't want any surprises?" Haewoo exchanged a glance with Sung-ho, who sat at the helm, his hands resting lightly on the controls. Neither man spoke, but the unspoken tension between them was clear. They had survived, yes, but none of them felt safe. The memory of Subin's transformation and the unearthly power of the flame tongues was too fresh. As the hours passed, the crew worked methodically, checking every system and running tests. The results came back normal, or as close to normal as they could hope for after such an ordeal. Yet, something still felt off. It wasn't anything tangible, just a subtle unease that lingered in the air, like the aftershock of a storm. Min-ju spent most of her time in the research lab, poring over the data they had collected during their encounter with the ruins. She replayed recordings of Subin's final moments, analyzing her words and mannerisms. There was something haunting about the way Subin had spoken, not just the layered voices, but the conviction behind them. It was as if she truly believed. The galaxy needed the flames to survive. "Captain," Min-ju called over the intercom, her voice tinged with urgency. "I think you should come see this." Ji-eun sighed and pushed herself out of her chair. Her muscles protested with every step, but she forced herself to keep moving. When she reached the lab, Min-ju was standing by a console, her face pale and her hands trembling slightly. "What is it?" Ji-eun asked, stepping closer. Min-ju gestured to the screen, which displayed a series of complex readings overlaid with fragments of text. "I've been reviewing the scans we took before we left the moon. Something doesn't add up. The energy levels around the ruins. They're dropping, but not completely. There's still activity down there." Ji-eun frowned. "Activity? What kind?" "I'm not sure," Min-ju admitted. "It's faint, almost undetectable, but it's consistent. Whatever we did with the ritual, it didn't fully shut down the flame tongues. They're dormant, but alive." The weight of those words settled over Ji-eun like a stone. She had hoped the mission was over, that they could leave the ruins, and the horrors they represented, behind. But now it seemed they had only delayed the inevitable. "If they're still active," Ji-eun said slowly, "then we can't assume they're contained. We need to monitor them, and warn anyone else who might stumble across them." Min-ju nodded. "That's not all. Listen to this." She played a recording of Subin's voice, the layered tones resonating eerily in the small room. "This part here," Min-ju continued, pausing the playback. "She says silence must end. Do you think she meant more than just the silent zone?" Ji-eun crossed her arms, considering the question. "Maybe. Or maybe she was speaking for the flame tongues themselves. If they see silence as death, then they'll do whatever it takes to spread their fire, even if it means destroying everything in their path." "But why?" Min-ju pressed. "Why would anyone create something so dangerous? Was it really just to conquer silence?" Ji-eun shook her head. "I don't know. Maybe they thought they were doing good, or maybe they were desperate. Either way, we can't let history repeat itself. If word gets out about the flame tongues, someone else will try to use them. And we both know how that ends. Minju looked down at her hands, her expression troubled. So what do we do? Destroy them? If we could, Ji-yeon replied grimly, but we barely survived containing them. Destroying them might be impossible, or worse, catastrophic. For now, we keep moving. We report what we found to command, but we make sure they understand the risks. Minju nodded reluctantly. And Subin? Ji-yeon hesitated. Talking about Subin was painful, a reminder of everything they had lost. We honor her sacrifice, she said finally. And we remember what happened here, that's all we can do. Back on the bridge, the crew gathered for a debriefing. Ji-yeon stood at the center, her posture straight despite her fatigue. She explained the situation as clearly as she could, emphasizing the importance of secrecy and caution. We're heading home, she concluded. But our mission isn't over. The galaxy may have turned its back on this place, but we can't afford to forget it. Keep your eyes open, stay alert, and trust each other. That's how we'll get through this. The crew nodded, their expressions serious but determined. They had faced the unknown together, and though the scars would remain, they had emerged, stronger for it. As the Hwarang entered hyperspace, leaving the silent zone far behind, Ji-yeon allowed herself a moment of reflection. She gazed out at the streaks of light passing by the viewport, the endless expanse of stars stretching beyond. Somewhere out there, the flame tongues waited, their power dormant but not forgotten. For now, the galaxy was safe. But Ji-yeon knew, better than to believe it would last. The flames had spoken once, and they would speak again. And when they did, humanity would have to decide, to embrace the fire, or risk being consumed by it.